You're watching Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Cheryl Brown. She is a member of the California State Assembly. She chairs the Select Committee on Small Business, so I'm not surprised that two of your bills that you dropped deal with small business. I mean, that really has been your mantra since I've met you.
Yes, it's been a long time.
Yeah, tell me why it's so important to you that you be a voice for small business.
You know, the reason is because I've been a small business owner for just about 40 years.
Oh, just 40.
Just about,
yeah.
The newspaper is about 40 years old. And
tell us about the newspaper.
The Black Voice newspaper.
Right.
Yeah, and it's still going. Our daughter has taken it over. Paulette Brown-Hines, Dr. Paulette Brown-Hines.
Of course.
She's taken it over and she's changed it and is doing great things with it. But it's always been a small business. I can't tell you, we've always had just a few employees, but we've had a large contingent of people who work with us and who like to volunteer.
And what we need to remember is in California and in the United States, small businesses employ about 2/3 of the workforce. I think that's the number.
That's the number.
And so often the larger corporations make the most noise and the small business interest is not necessarily considered.
Right.
Well, not anymore. Thanks to Cheryl Brown.
Well, I'm hollering it from the rooftops when I'm in Sacramento.
So let's talk about one of your bills. It has already passed out of the Assembly unanimously. That's quite an accomplishment.
So excited.
I can feel it. It's called AB 285. That's the number. Tell us about it.
What AB 285 does is to give assistance to micro enterprise businesses. That's businesses 5 people or less.
Right.
And you know, we have all the funds that that workforce development gets, and they're developing jobs.
Right.
But if you don't develop the businesses, then they won't be able to provide the jobs.
And you're speaking of the WIBs, as we know, the Workforce Investment Boards. And I've spoken with several individuals who are huge fans of those organizations. I think Josie Gonzalez, member of the Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County. The challenge, though, is that WIBs are challenged with funding. I mean, there's no doubt, you know, some WIBs get money from the federal government, and that's being cut due to the sequester, but you're changing that.
Well, now, wait a minute. That's federal government.
Right.
And that's a sequester, but that doesn't mean that they didn't get the money. WIBs are funded by the federal government.
Right.
That comes to the state, and then the state funds the county WIBs, and there are some WIBs that are standalone or in cities like San Bernardino. And so what my idea was is that they were talking about jobs, 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 but no one was talking about helping the person that provides the jobs. They will help businesses generally that are huge.
Right.
You know, I'm sure one of the big ones is Molycorp out in the desert. Okay, they help
minerals.
Them. Yes, they help them immensely, but nobody's really looking at the needs of the small business person.
So AB 285 is looking to offer that training, that technical assistance, that entrepreneurial guidance, so that small businesses can grow, develop, and hire.
And it requires them to help those small businesses. Now, small businesses are going to have to come to the table as well. And as this is ferreted out, we'll see what happens with that. But we're going to put the road there.
And you're doing it,
so
and it's
they just need to follow the path.
Right, and it's in the Senate now. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great.
Good. You think the Senate's going to take it up? I mean, with a 75-0 vote in the Assembly, one would presume it should have a great chance of success.
Right.
I also want to talk to you about another bill of yours, AB 550, and that deals with the use of small businesses when the state is contracting. Right. Simply stated.
You know, all of us pay taxes.
Right.
And all of us should be at the table to be able to reap some of the benefits. They contract with people up and down the state, but 25% of that, when Governor Schwarzenegger was there, and as well as Jerry Brown, they had an executive order that 25% of the contracts should be let to small businesses.
Okay. Now, was that too high or too low in your mind? That 25%.
No, I think that everyone should have a equal playing field, but that doesn't happen. Since that doesn't happen, I think that the 25%, if we could just if we could just do the 25%,
I understand.
We can up our businesses. Our businesses can then hire more people, and we're on our way to success.
So what does 550 say? What are you looking?
So 550 codifies that executive order that both of the governors passed. And what it says is that all state departments have to do 25% of their business with small businesses, veterans, veteran businesses, women-owned businesses. So
what do you think? Hasn't passed yet.
It passed.
A committee?
Oh yeah.
But what about?
It's in approach. It's in approach right now.
And you expect it's going to get to the floor. I mean, look, I don't want to be on the other side of you. I mean, you make sure your bills get.
It's going to get to the floor.
It is going to get to the floor. If you have anything to say about it.
My whole thing is to just if it can pass.
Right.
And I only had, I think, one person who voted against it in committee.
Okay, so.
And they just the reason that they voted against it, maybe it wasn't just one, but the reason they were voting against it is because they didn't want to give a benefit to small business, or they didn't want to give a benefit to veterans. And I said, oh no, we have to do this. This is important.
I want to shift gears and talk about student athletes. I love the laugh. You know, it's so interesting how student athletes can make so much money for their institutions.
Thank you.
Be it public, be it private. And your concern is that student athletes who are making so much money for these universities are not being treated, are not being taken care of. And so tell me about your bill, AB 475. It's a innovative one, no doubt.
You know, it's actually a bill that came to us because the players were the former players have an organization.
Of course.
And they were concerned that this is an issue, and it's been an issue for a long time. I didn't know a whole lot about it.
Right.
But my God, as I have been getting involved in it, what has happened is that the large universities and the NCAA are recipients of television and licensing fees.
Yeah.
And it comes
8 figures, 9 figures.
It comes to $11 billion a year. Now, what they do is they go out and they get talent.
They recruit.
They just recruit talent from all over the country. However, in a state school, they bring the kids in, and they don't give them they give them a scholarship, but most times, will only give them a year-to-year scholarship. And that's because NCAA wants it that way. Now, they give them a year-to-year, and then if they don't do well, or if they break their leg, or if something happens to them, they're kind of out of luck.
Bad, yeah.
But when they bring them in, they don't give them the entire cost for their education. They short them on the books, and they also short them on the tuition. So they have to then get Pell Grants or loans.
And yet these institutions are making millions.
They're making this is the cutoff is 20 million. You have to make 20 million under my bill. You have to make 20 million in television and licensing fees.
And at this stage, that would apply to UCLA and Cal. So your bill is asking that student athletes be given scholarships of up to 5 years upon matriculation.
Right.
So there's no anxiety, stress, fear, risk of injury.
And if they want to finish, they can finish. If they decide they're going to go pro, they can go pro. Right. There's no prohibition.
Are you looking to have this bill apply to private institutions, the USCs, the Stanfords?
We're looking at that.
Interesting. I wonder the legality of it. I mean,
I know.
It's a tricky one.
I know.
I'm a lawyer, and that's a dangerous thing. So I'm trying to. But there's no doubt on the public school side, you do have that
public school
authority.
side, yeah.
So what do you think about this bill? Is it going to get some legs?
It's going to be 2 years.
Hit the touchdown?
It'll be a 2-year bill.
Okay.
I'm not trying to rush it.
Okay.
But we will have a hearing, and we'll hear what the people say.
Her name is Cheryl Brown. She is one of the newest members of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. You're watching Charter California Edition.
Which collegiate conference garnered the highest payout for its television rights? The Pac-12 has negotiated the richest deal for its television rights, totaling an estimated $350 million annually.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We're joined by Nancy Hart, member of the Riverside City Council. And Councilwoman, I want to speak with you generally about a specific measure on the Riverside ballot that's coming up, but more philosophically. Let's talk about Measure A, which is a provision that authorizes the Riverside Water Utility, which is owned by Riverside, to transfer funds to the general fund for the city of Riverside. It's done quite often. Los Angeles, many cities throughout the state do that when the city owns a public utility. But through a series of machinations, there was a need to get a vote by the people. And that's what's before the voters now. It's not a tax increase, it's a transfer, yet a lot of controversy surrounding Measure A. Talk to me about what Measure A in Riverside will do as an example of these types of transfers.
Well, I think a lot of people think that it's a tax, and a lot of people, somebody back when dropped the ball by not taking it to the voters. It needed to go to the voters, and the fact that it's gone these years without going to the voters, you can lay it back on the council because someone in the past has dropped the ball and not gotten it to the ballot. And so voters sometimes are not very happy with us when we do things like that, and nor I.
No,
I don't think anybody's happy when that happens.
But what's interesting, in Riverside's case, the transfer from the utility owned by the city to the city general fund has been going on for 100 years?
Yes.
This is nothing new.
This is nothing new, and the voters have voted it in 3 different times. And I think maybe that's why the ball got dropped, because they'd done it so consistently that maybe they thought they didn't need to go. But it was in fact mandated that they do go. And so it was our fault for not doing it. But now that that is taken care of, I believe that the residents will be very upset with themselves if this does not pass.
And what's interesting about Measure A is it's very specific as to where the money would go. Not so much the measure, but we know what the transfer has paid for in the past.
Yes.
It has paid for
crossing guards. It has paid for SROs at
which are housing.
No, police officers at the school resource officers.
Got it, perfect.
At the schools, and they sometimes help pay for it, and sometimes we help pay for it. But a lot of times, too, it's paid for our 311 call center. And my goodness, the call center, I think, does something like 4,000 or 5,000 calls a month.
And 311 is non-emergency.
Non-emergency.
Graffiti removal.
Yes. Potholes, anything that you have an issue with. Any number that you can't find, call 311. They'll put you in touch with county offices, other offices, judicial, anything.
And so once there was a lawsuit brought on this very issue, what the city decided to do is it stopped the transfer, but it lost about $6 million a year over the last 2 years.
Yes.
But it needed that money somewhere, so it dipped into reserves. Am I right?
Right.
So,
partly, yeah.
So why is it that you perceive that there is this hue and cry against Measure A? It's fascinating to me, just as an observer. It's not a tax increase. It's been done for over 100 years.
Right, and 40 or 50 other cities that own their own utilities transfer money all the time. And somehow they feel like that if we didn't transfer that money, their rates would go down maybe, which is incorrect, because the money that we get as a transfer is the profit money that they make, and they are required to make a profit or they wouldn't be in business.
And what was so interesting to me is recently I moderated councilmatic debates for Riverside. There are 2 contested races out of the 4 that are running for Riverside City Council. One is the race for your ward. You're not running for re-election. And then there's another one.
3.
Yeah, Ward 3, Ward 6. In Ward 3, there were 4 candidates on the stage. Only 1 supported Measure A. In Ward 6, there were 6 candidates on the stage. Only 1 supported Measure A. I mean, municipalities have been looking for revenue sources left, right, and center, trying to find money. This is money that will not impact voters in terms of a tax increase,
And it'll save us from taking it out of the general fund, and it's something the voters are already accustomed to. Plus, they're accustomed to the services that these will provide, and those services cannot be provided out of the general fund. We cannot afford to let our surplus dwindle down to that, to any extent like that, because for a long time, because then we would get higher rates when we do bonding and stuff like that. And I think sometimes there are people out there, whether they run for office or not, who would really like to think that they know so much more than everyone else, and that they have a better opinion of how it should run, and that we are not transparent. And if we're not transparent, I don't know what we do except turn ourselves inside out.
But what does this say to you, though, about the body politic, that here's a scenario where money is essentially being handed to Riverside, a city, by the way, that has not been considered rife with fiscal mismanagement.
Right.
It's not San Bernardino, which has declared bankruptcy, or Stockton, or Mammoth Lakes. You know, in the middle of a recession, Riverside was able to engage in the Renaissance Project, which has really revived significant portions of this region.
And we could not do Renaissance today. It would not go through today.
There wouldn't be the political will.
There would not be the political will to do for your children what no one did for you. That is a mindset. And they're always talking about what they would do for their grandchildren, and that we want you to do this for our grandchildren. We want to set things aside. But when push comes to shove, a lot of times they're not there with the vote. But I really do think it will pass. I think the voters are smarter than that.
You do?
I do.
Have you spoken with voters? I mean, look, you're still active. You may not be running for re-election.
Yes.
Everyone knows who you are.
Yes.
You're out in your community. Are you hearing from voters a skepticism about Measure A?
No.
In your circles, you do get a sense that your voters understand what Measure A does and does not do.
Right. I think things, groups like the Raincross Square and the Chamber of Commerce, they're all solidly behind it because they know exactly what is going to benefit the city.
If, for example, Measure A does not pass, there will be a hole of about $6 million in Riverside's budget.
Yes.
You won't be there of your own volition.
Right.
What happens then?
Well, there will be cuts. There will be layoffs. There will be police layoffs. There will be fire layoffs.
It's that simple. There's no doubt about it in your mind.
Not in my mind
because
at all.
$6 million is a
it's a significant amount of money when you've already cut your budget to the bone. We have made cuts every single year and asked departments to make cuts every single year for the last 4 or 5 years so we wouldn't hit the reserves. And we have really, really strategically only drawn on them when we absolutely had to.
I'm wondering was it a miscalculation to put Measure A on the ballot at the same time as a councilmatic race, or several councilmatic races, when there would be a lot of politicking going on and people trying to outdo themselves in terms of, I'm more fiscally responsible than the next person.
Right, and I really do think the voters will see through this. They always have in the past. They voted for it 3 times in the past, and they've had those same issues before. You know, nobody likes taxes, and this is not a tax. This is just a continuation of what you're already spending. You wouldn't even notice it.
What about the fact that this particular election will be mail only?
I think it's a good thing.
You do?
I think it's a good thing. When we have mail only, we have more voters.
Really?
We do.
That's interesting, because in some places it's been a challenge to have mail only.
When there's nothing on the ballot, like a presidential race or a senator's race or something, and there's only these few items, people tend not to vote.
Right, but making it easy.
But putting it in their hands, and also follow-up calls. I'll be making follow-up calls for people to make sure they get their ballot in the mail.
And so it's consolidated. The councilmatic races will be on this ballot as well as Measure A. Are there any other measures that will drive people of significance?
There might be. I can't think.
So in the final analysis, though, you have confidence in the voters' ability to see what Measure A...
They've always come through. When there's a need and they see it in their backyard, the need is there, and the way to fulfill it is there, they have always come through.
Her name is Nancy Hart, member of the Riverside City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
In terms of population size, where does the city of Riverside rank in the state of California? At just over 300,000 residents, Riverside ranks as the 12th largest city of California.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Dr. Muhamad Ali. Yes, that is his name. He is a professor at UC Riverside in Islamic Studies. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. And I want to speak with you about the recent events in Boston. We know that the perpetrators, or at least the allegations are, they are known as the Tsarnaev brothers. They appear to be Muslim, and it's caused a lot of consternation. I remember before the perpetrators were identified, someone said to me, I hope it's domestic, because I don't want yet another kind of international crisis to develop around this. And even though at some level these men were domestic, there's that specter of Islam behind us in terms of more Islamic terrorists entering our soil. Talk to me about that.
First of all, it's not only you and your friends who are worried about this. Hopefully it's domestic rather than international. Even Muslims also worried about that. So I was receiving calls that, oh, we hope that it's not a Muslim, for example. So, Muslims are also, showing they fear that if this Muslim, then they will feel that the problem will even become worse because of these, misperceptions and images of Islam being associated with terrorism all the time in the West, in America in particular.
And that's what we see today, is that terrorism, Islam, one and the same.
Right.
And there are people who will point to certain texts in the Quran as evidence that Islam is teaching its adherents to attack the West, to attack non-adherents. You can point to a lot of religious texts and manipulate in any way you would like.
Correct. That's correct. So terrorism, first of all, is not new language. Terrorism actually since the Roman Empire, and you have French Revolution also coined the term terrorism. So it's not invented by Muslims, the term terrorism itself. But the idea of making others fear through your actions, now becomes associated with Islam, especially after 9/11. So I would say that terrorism is not a specific, doesn't have religion. Terrorism doesn't have religion. But a religious text or religious figure, religious authority might be quoted or cited as inciting certain actions of violence against the perceived enemy or real enemy. So it is a cosmic, war.
But what is it that for some reason in the 21st century we have this fervor within segments of the Islamic faith where terrorism is condoned at some level? Again, I know it's just segments, but the religion is how many centuries old? And yet, at this moment in time, it's a struggle. It's a struggle within the faith.
That's right. It is a struggle within the faith because Islam is basically faith and action. So you don't simply believe in something, but you act according to the belief. So that's I think, jihad is a heavy term now.
It's funny. What does jihad mean?
Jihad is just struggle, basically.
Struggle.
That's it.
That's what it means. Struggle.
Just struggle. So, but then you have different forms of struggle, right? So you have most Muslims use this jihad as a way of saying that we are struggling in our life, we wanted to improve our condition of life, we educate ourselves, we spiritually also strive, through different rituals. That also jihad. So jihad has so many forms. But then you have some.
But why is it at this moment in time? I mean, look, in Christianity, there was the Crusades. I mean, it seems as if faiths kind of go through these evolutions where their desire to proselytize or whatever it may be leads to violence. And again, I don't mean to make generalizations, but it seems like this is the moment in time for Islam where violence seems to be part of certain segments.
It's very tiny minority who use jihad for understanding qital, which another term means warfare. So if you want to translate qital, it's more toward fighting. but jihad is struggle. So fighting, and you can use a kitab in the Quran. So you can fight if you are attacked by people. So if your homes are, for example, are destroyed, then you have the right to defense. So it's a defensive struggle, a defensive fighting in the Quran.
If you look at the history of Islam,
right?
You know, as Christianity was going through its violent upheaval during the Middle Ages, the Muslims of the world were kind of the protectors of these minority faiths, be it their own, be it Jews, be it whatever it may be.
Spain,
it's flipped.
It's flipped. It's flipped, right.
You know, so look, I ask you, I mean, because you are a professor, what's happened?
Right. One is textual, meaning a holy book might be interpreted in, you know, different ways. There are many interpretations of Islam. There is no one interpretation of Islam. That's first. In other words, a text, a holy book, or any book for that matter, can be interpreted for different purposes, right? Second is historical. So you have the history or the use of history of the crusade, for example. Right? So the Christian crusade, and Muslims, you know, they also used it to suggest that, well, actually, we always are in war with Christians because we already had that history of conflict. Lastly, is psychological reasons why certain segment, a tiny minority of young generations turn into violence. First, they don't have the means. They are disconnected from the mainstream Muslims, the mainstream mosque, the mainstream imam. So they are disconnected. Psychologically, very easy for them to turn into the internet. That they use internet and, you know, learn how to do.
Let's talk about Islam in America.
Sure.
Because there's no doubt that the Islamic community in America is growing a bit.
Yeah.
I have to think, like you said, please don't let it be a Muslim. Please don't let it be a Muslim.
Right.
You know, that there's this kind of internal struggle that, you know, I have to think that most Muslims in America are just living their lives.
Right. First, you have 1.6 billion Muslims around the world. 2.3 billion Christians. And about 3 until 7 million Muslims in America.
It's hard to know.
They are, you know, immigrants, and then you have also converts. So you have immigrations and conversion to Islam. You have black Americans, you know, slaves, for example. Until today, you have immigrants from different countries. But these American Muslims mostly are mainstream and middle class. They are educated. They are, you know, mostly educated and mainstream. In other words, they are engaged in society. They are engaged in politics. This is a good thing. I mean,
but is there a fear within the Muslim community that America will not become hospitable anymore because of this kind of drip drab of these crazy people that are making it worse?
Yes, there is a fear. There is a fear of what they call Islamophobia, you know, fearing of Islam, that anything Arab or anything Islamic is non-American, for example. There is a fear among Muslims. That's why they are now engaging and they are doing outreach programs. So mosques become open to everyone to come and listen to the sermons, and you could, you know, join the prayer if they like, and so forth. So it's open. So everyone is open to any mosque in the United States. There are about 2,000 mosques in the U.S. now. California is one of the largest, you know, in terms of the number of mosques.
So how do you feel, specifically? You're a professor. You were born into the Islamic faith. How do you feel?
You know, my name's Muhamad Ali, so even
You're lucky.
Yes. They, you know, even they don't ask, they might assume that I am a Muslim, and I'm from Indonesia. It's the largest Muslim. You know.
Although I would have presumed with that name you were Arab. It just shows, but it shows though misperceptions. I mean, Indonesia is the largest
Muslim country in the world.
In the
I
world.
mean, yeah, right. That's correct. It's 200 million people there, right? 250 million people. Well, I feel, you know, America is the land of opportunity, and it is very welcoming, especially after 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. You don't have a quota for people, so Muslims are actually welcome. That's why you have Muslims immigrants, because they know that America is the land of opportunity. When they come here, they have to struggle, you know, but they are educated.
Okay, his name is Dr. Muhamad Ali. He is a professor of Islamic Studies at UC Riverside. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for watching Charter California Edition.